Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. If there's one man whose life and accomplishments we can all appreciate, that man would be Gary Gygax. For those of you unaware or new to D&D, Gary Gygax is the godfather of modern RPGs. The man literally invented Dungeons & Dragons back when it was called Advanced Dungeons & Dragons back in the 1970s. Personally, I interpret the removal of the word advanced from Dungeons & Dragons as a scathing commentary on the de-evolution of our society. But now is not the time to wallow in my own bitter cynicism. Now is the time to interpret what a legend this man was. Don't believe me? Check out this entry from his Wikipedia article. To quote, Gygax, newly single, took advantage of his time on the West Coast, renting an immense mansion, increasing his cocaine use, and spending time with several young starlets. I roll to seduce the dragon. Like I said before, f***ing legend. However, the story I'm reading today proves that being affiliated with a legend doesn't make you a legend. Today's story revolves around a player whose DM claims to have played with Gary Gygax himself, and how it all horribly fell apart. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Enjoy. This story is titled, When You Look at Someone Through Rose-Colored Glasses, All the Red Flags Just Look Like Flags. Some backstory. Several years ago, I was a part of an RPG guild. A lot of people in the group ended up fitting in and out because of real life and stuff. My good friend Skull is one of the founding members. A friend of his, Anari, is another. And then there's me. Together, the three of us decided to join a game that had an advert posted at our local store by someone looking for players. This game came from someone outside of our guild. So we meet up for a session 0, and the DM, we'll call him SH, had several other players ready. The wizard, NB, is not in attendance, which you will see will lead to some problems later. He offered up several adventures and adventure paths that we could choose from. A lot of them seemed rough, and one of the players was very new. Let me go ahead and list out everyone we have in this game. CTK, that's me. My good friend Skull, our fighter of some sort. My other friend Anari, our cleric. Nor, our bard who was from Russia or the Ukraine. The DM, SH, an older guy who had boasted that he had played at the tables with Gygax and Greenwood, which made me think that this was going to be awesome. We were going to get a real old-school DM, the kind of guy who had been there since the formative years of the game. Then we have Wolf, the newbie and our dwarven ranger, and that guy, our wizard. We'll call him NB for short. We decided to play Pathfinder's Legacy of Fire. We picked this one because it was one of the choices that the DM offered that didn't seem like it would kill us over and over, and we wanted a long-term game with these characters. The first thing that should have been kind of a red flag is when I, hearing that the setting was a kind of North Africa, Middle East type analog, thought it would be cool to play the ninja class, kind of re-flavored as an Assassin's Creed type guy, with wrist blades and the like. The DM shot this down right away, very upset at the idea. I took it in stride and built a rogue. A week or two goes by, and it's the first session. I show up and the next issue begins. My rogue is a woman. I'm a 6'3" dude who might look a little out of place at a gaming table to some people as I am black. I didn't think he expected me to play a female character, let alone kind of a small female rogue who was this kind of stuck-up thief. The DM seemed taken aback, and you could see the visible confusion as he asked me again if I had filled this out right, as if I didn't know my own gender or the difference between the words male and female. Now, we get past that little hurdle, and the next one quickly arises. Skull is a bit of a voice actor at the table, and plays his character Chompers with this kind of voice that is clear, but just kind of nasally and honestly reminds me of Yoshi's from the old Super Mario World TV show from the early 90s. No one else seemed to have a problem with it. But whenever Chompers speak, the DM gives Skull this look like he is just pissed. Skull didn't just do this at session 1. He demonstrated the voice during our session 0, as he had the idea way back then. SH said nothing at that point. Inari decides that this cleric is going to go for a special trait in Pathfinder for healers, where if they heal some super high amount of damage, they earn a special boon. The catch is that you lose points towards the goal when you deal damage. When he runs this by the DM, he gets a little bit antsy about the idea of doing it, and seems like he's gonna flat out refuse. Of course, Inari insists that he will track it all. Inari is a bit of an old school player himself that doesn't really let rule violations slip past him, at least not without saying something. He's not gonna let points go unaccounted for or let them slip by. Eventually, the DM agrees. Halfway through session 1, an issue with NB arises. Remember how I said that he wasn't there for session 0? Well, SH was supposed to know him outside of the table. We get into some situation and ask his wizard to do something, and he's like, "My character wouldn't do that." A little more time passes, and we come to the revelation that he doesn't have most of his gear either. No staff, for instance, or weapon of any kind. Just a spellbook. For those not familiar with Pathfinder, it's kind of like D&D 3.5 and pretty different from 5th edition. If you know how wizards work in 5th edition or 4th edition, they always have something wizard-like that they can pull out. But Pathfinder wizards have spells that run out more easily. Cantrips also aren't expendable, just like in 5th edition. But there are rules around them involving spell schools and taking up some more slots. Plus, the damage they do is shit. So a wizard without a crossbow or something is going to spend some time just being completely useless. NB tells us that he's just trying to play the type of wizard that he wants and envisioned. Sure, whatever. First session is mostly okay other than that. And at the end of the session, the DM comes to Skull and asks that he stops doing the character voice, since the DM has an issue understanding it. Skull doesn't like this, as he had this whole thing planned out, and how he wanted to play that character, and he instead asks if he can just make a new one. Skull is understanding and accommodating and makes no huge deal about this. The DM lets him make a new dude. So, believe it or not, I actually have experience with character voices being less than ideal. A while back, I played this Minotaur named Duelist Stonehorn. He sounded a lot like this. He was super cool, and he was super fun to play as, and he was always angry. He was a total joke character. But, this first session with him didn't go as planned. Why? Well, that's because no one could understand what the hell he was saying. It's important to remember when playing D&D, what your character says is much more important than how they say it. Don't get me wrong, character voices are totally awesome, but sometimes you can't let your own enthusiasm get in the way. It sucks since it's hard not to take it personally when someone doesn't like the voice you give your character, I get it. But use it as motivation to practice, record yourself doing the voice, get feedback from your friends, etc., etc. Over time, it's inevitable that you will improve and your table and your character will thank you for it. Alright, that's enough from me. Let's go ahead and get back to the story. Session 2 is where the real trouble gets kicked off. There's a caravan that we're guarding, or riding with, or something, I don't remember. And there's a missing sheep or a lamb or goat or something. This woman wants us to help her find the animal. We can tell that this is a small quest or something to kind of endear her or the caravan to the party. When we go strike out to help, the wizard refuses, saying that his character wouldn't do that. So we go at it alone. NB is kind of cold to us and refuses to really do much besides act pompous, but the rest of the table kind of pushes past this and works around him. There are light moments of others trying to interact with him, but he doesn't budge on being stuck up. Session 2 kind of leaves a weird taste in my mouth, but it's more to do with the wizard than anything else. I discussed this with Skull. We had a habit, he, Inari, and I, of going to this diner after we played that was just up from the game store. It was usually late enough that the place was empty, and it was one of the places that our guild would frequent. We did invite the rest of the table, but they all had things to do. Session 3 comes around, and we're in a town doing part of the main quest line by now, and there's a nice detailed map. Noir and I have a little rapport going, and she's on the roguey side of Bardom. There was a real cool part of this session where the party gets ambushed in town, and the bard was one street over. I slip into the corner and sneak out. She and I get to the rooftops and pepper these ambushers with arrows and spells until our group can break out and fight them off. It was dope. But when we are asked to go into this one building to fight something else a little while later, the wizard refuses. He claims his character wouldn't do that, and waits outside while we, weak from the previous fight the monsters. Let me say right here that Pathfinder adventure paths were known to be kind of deadly, so being one member down for encounters sucks. We press on, and things come to a bit of a head. Inari, our cleric, tries to do something. I don't remember exactly what, but he had been growing frustrated with some of the things the DM was doing. Some of the fights would be balls hard, but then there would be these unbalanced, weirdly easy ones. The DM had said that we could power game a bit, and that the module was made for it. But it turned out that he was just inserting some things and omitting others. The thing that finally made Inari upset is that when he did whatever it was he did in this session, the DM told him no, because essentially the rules didn't allow that. Well, Inari, being one of those stickler types for rules, pulls out his phone and goes to the SRD site for Pathfinder, and finds the rule real quick. DM says that it's not the book. A little argument erupts about how accurate the site is, which, if you don't already know, is basically the rules pulled straight out of the book, unless you're on third-party or homebrew stuff. The DM finally hits his hands on the table. Nor jumps. Wolf seems pretty shocked, and the rest of us get really awkward about this. DM tells Inari if the rule is in the book to find it, and slams that big-ass Pathfinder 1st edition book on the table to slide it down to him. It only really slides to Skull, and Skull passes it over with an awkward look on his face. I was in the opposite corner from Inari at the table, but there was no one between us. For the next several minutes, I can hear him muttering and flipping through pages. He eventually finds the rule, notes it down, and waits until the end to share it with the DM. The rest of the night goes awkwardly, and DM seems to accept the rule after the game is over, though he doesn't really apologize. We go to our diner again, and oddly enough, the DM tags along this time, on our invitation. It's just the 4 of us, and he seems completely reasonable. We talk to him about random things, and it feels like, okay, maybe this will kind of repair things a bit, and just overall make them better. Session 4. The wizard is still being a shitbag, refusing to play anything but the asshole. At this point, we accepted it. Wolf is learning the game better, and coming out of his shell a little. Some kind of creature shows up in town this time, and we're sent to talk to it. I remember it being something higher level like a sphinx. Noor and I could crack jokes from time to time, but we weren't loud or really doing it all session. and we were pretty attentive and into our characters. I make a crack to her about how it would be funny if I just stole this thing the creature had while it was talking. It was obviously meant to be a joke, and it wasn't while the DM was talking either. We were coming up with what to say back, and she was going to probably end up speaking for us as the bard. The DM stops everyone at the table and tells me to go ahead and roll for it. I'm confused and ask for what? He explains that I shouldn't declare an action if I'm not willing to do it. Keep in mind, we're not in combat and this thing has so far just spoken to us. Most DMs, if they were just trying to teach me a lesson, would have just dropped it right there. But he insists. I straight up tell him no. For a few minutes, he tries to push me to do this thing, lectures me about joking and how this is a serious game. This hadn't really been an issue before. There had been jokes at the table from everyone except the wizard. It really sucked because most of the time the game was decent. The wizard sucked, but everyone else playing at the table was fine. I joined this game to play with Skull and Inari, because usually it ended up that in the guild one of us was always running the game, or we were in different games because of the order we had joined them. We just wanted to game together. Eventually, the DM lets it go. I got real quiet and spent the rest of the session kind of going through the motions as needed. I don't talk again in character and only speak to declare what I'm doing. The mood went sour for me right there. After the session ended, I dropped out of the game. Oddly enough, Inari stuck with it for longer than Skull or I, but he reported that there were several issues. Even after we left, the encounters were all over the place. Wizard never warmed up to anyone, and the game became a bit of a drag. I don't think SH answered my email about leaving, and to be honest, some of this might be my poor memory of events. Like, I might have lasted 5 sessions and Skull might have quit in 4. I remember talking with Skull about my quitting. And I remember feeling kind of defeated over the whole thing, as I only learned Pathfinder and D&D a few years before, and it was one of my first in-person experiences with the game. I am still playing and DMing though. 5th edition is my game now, so it didn't turn me off. End of story. Jesus Christ, thank God it's over. This OP has the writing skills of a 5th grader. So many sentences I had to just completely ignore because they were so grammatically broken. I felt like I was having a brain aneurysm. Fuck! Whew, deep breaths. It just goes to show that with age does not always come wisdom. And the only thing worse than a problem player is a problem player being enabled by a problem DM. Before we go, let's go ahead and take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake, huh? This week's art is done by viewer DreamerArt2 and depicts myself demanding that YouTube give me what I'm owed. Now, this piece actually comes at a pretty convenient time since I'm about to hit 10,000 subscribers in the next few days. And if I don't get my play button, I swear to God I will write them a strongly worded letter. After burning them all alive, of course. Proper dragons have standards. Thank you again, DreamerArt, for submitting your artwork. And if you want to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. It means the world to me that I can create content that inspires creators like you to create art like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.